Welcome to God at Work, Stories of Grace and Faith. I'm your host, Chuck Groover, and this week, kind of for the unscripted episode, I am going to pretty much just touch on a topic that kind of came to mind last week when I was asked for a couple of Bible verses from someone to use against speaking to dead spirits, or to speaking to the dead. And when they asked me the question, the first thing that comes to mind is I can easily produce or find a bunch of verses, but most of them are in the Old Testament. And just like a lot of other areas of sin where a lot of the verses speaking against it are found in the Old Testament, I had the feeling that whoever they would be approaching might use basically that or the grace card of saying, well, that's the Old Testament. I believe in the New Testament where I am no longer under the law. And there's really a problem with that, which we find a lot of times that, and I think there's a lot of Christians out there who use that excuse as, or use that as an excuse for pretty much living in sin. And there are a number of verses in the New Testament that talk against it. One that was kind of pointed out recently is actually in Jude. He talks against, that's one of the, against it. That's actually one of the things he's warning the people about that he's writing to, is that there are a number of people that have come into the church that he's written to where they are claiming to be Christians, but they're basically perverting grace by saying it allows them to continue a sinful life. Paul in Romans, pretty much the entire, just about the entire book of Romans, but Romans chapter 6 is one of the main spots where Paul keeps asking the question of if grace means that our sins are forgiven, or basically if grace means this, does that mean we should continue sinning? He says, by no means. But a lot of people overlook, there's that the people that use that thing of I'm no longer under the law, they tend to skip over those verses thinking that because they are no longer under the law, that makes them above the law. And I kind of look at it as, if you consider the concept of diplomatic immunity, where a diplomat tends to not be subject to the laws of a country that he's visiting, per se, that does not give him free rein to go and just flaunt that by blatantly breaking the law. He still has consequences he has to face if he breaks the law. He might not be punished under the rules of the law, but if he's blatantly breaking the law, he might find himself losing his position as a diplomat. He might find himself, his character and everything being tarnished in his own country, where people that once respected him look down on him. See, he might not be punished by the laws of that country, but he still has consequences he would have to face for breaking the law, even if he's not punishable to that law. And as Christians, we might not be fully punishable by the law, but we still have consequences each of us has to face if we commit sin. Yes, once saved, always saved type thing. But one question is, if we can continue on in sin, we really need to first take a look at and ask, are we really saved if we're able to continue on in sin? But then the other thing to remember is each of us are going to, Christian, non-Christian, saved, non-saved, each of us will face a judgment. Those of us who are saved, our judgment is more to hold us accountable for what we have done as to what sort of treasure we will have to lay down at Christ's feet. So, do we want to be laying down scrap and junk at Christ's feet? Or do we want to be laying down a great treasure at Christ's feet? And that's pretty much just what was on my mind regarding that, is just how a lot of times when we try to approach someone out of love to confront them in their sin, a lot of times we are faced with them trying to say, because they are saved, they don't have to worry about it. And we need to realize, besides pointing out in love their sin, helping them to understand that what they're doing is wrong, but we also need to also point out that even though they're saved, and technically they might be able to not have to worry about it, there's still going to be consequences that they will have to face. So, this is Chuck Groover. That was Unscripted, and that's God at Work. Thank you for listening to God at Work, Stories of Grace and Faith. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at God at Work Podcast. If you have comments, suggestions, or a story you would like to be considered for the podcast, you can email us at stories@godatworkpodcast.com. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help support us, go to patreon.com/godatworkpodcast, or you can also support us by leaving us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. God at Work, Stories of Grace and Faith is brought to you by Becoming God's Man Ministries, and is recorded and produced by me, Chuck Groover. Theme music for God at Work is by the band 39 Stripes and can be found at facebook.com/39stripes. And again, thank you for listening.